when I first got sober, discipline was a really alien concept to me. And today I want to talk a little bit about how discipline and my understanding of it as a creative person in recovery has changed over the last 5.5 years, from when I was in active addiction to when I first came into recovery, and since then my idea and understanding of discipline and how best to use it in my own life has changed. And so if it is something that you struggle with, then hopefully this video can be illuminating and helpful, and hopefully it can provoke a few thoughts in your own life about your own journey and where you're up to. When I was in active addiction, discipline didn't really have any kind of conscious place in my life. It was there in some small part in hindsight. Looking back, I did still have jobs. I did turn up for them. I did make plans with family and friends. I had some kind of discipline, but it wasn't really anything that my life revolved around. It was just kind of an after effect of being alive. Strangely, I think discipline without intention can be quite a negative thing, and I've been trying to understand this idea in my head about how active addiction has a strange kind of discipline to it, not in a true disciplined sense, but in a routine sense, like doing the same thing every day, drinking every day, using drugs every day, partying every day, hedonistic behaviour most days, whatever it might have been. And so I think in recovery now, this kind of discipline with intention has become really important to me. And when I was early in recovery, I brought discipline into my life with an absolute vengeance. I became incredibly obsessed with it. And, when I got rid of drink and got rid of drugs, I was left with myself. And so I took up a lot of new obsessions, and I still have obsessions that come and go. And part of that obsession, when I was right at the beginning of my recovery journey, was, being incredibly strict and disciplined and structured with my life. And I think for a time it really did serve an important purpose. And so I would definitely advise people to think about discipline as a tool that we can use when we're early in recovery. And I think replacement is really important when we're fresh, because I went from drinking and using drugs most days to not drinking and using drugs at all. And so what I replaced that with was a job that kept me active and physical outside. I replaced it with healthy eating. I replaced it with connection and love, and started building this kind of disciplined life. One thing I do want to make very clear though is that I'm not trying to live my life with such a disciplined intensity as I once was. And there's a couple of reasons for that, which I'll get onto a bit later. I think to touch on why discipline really matters, because people think that discipline equals rigidity, equals boredom, it equals mundanity, if that's even a word, and these were all things I really feared when I was in active addiction, because I was an artist, I was creative, I couldn't be tied down with structure and routine. I had to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, quite selfishly a lot of the time. And I think that reframing of what discipline is really about, it's about building a life that you really want to live with intention, and recognizing that to get there, we need to have some kind of structures and frameworks in place to stop us from, just doing whatever it is we want to do. Because, even now with 5.5 years under my belt in recovery, a lot of mornings I wake up and I think I don't want to get out of bed, I don't want to go to work, I could just sit here on my phone all day, I could put the TV on and drink coffee at home and do nothing, and discipline is that constant battle that we all have with ourselves. It's an internal battle, definitely. And I think the point I wanted to get out before about how my conception of discipline has changed is because I know in my experience when I was new to recovery, I used to use discipline as a bit of a weapon to beat myself up with, and I don't think that in hindsight was a very healthy use of discipline. I think that was quite a negative use of discipline, and I know that I shame myself a lot. I'm very critical of myself. I'm very hard on myself. And if that sounds like you, then what I would like you to do is just to try and learn how to practice discipline with kindness and with self-compassion. And it's really important to think about discipline as a positive force for change in our lives and not a negative weapon that we can beat ourselves up with when we don't do something right, or we miss a day, or we get up late, or we oversleep, you know. I think discipline without compassion is quite unhealthy, really. So my life went from chaos in active addiction to this kind of obsessive discipline in early recovery. And now I have like a structured and compassionate discipline in my life. And it's given me a sense of freedom, both physically in the way that I live, because I've built this system around me now, working full-time as an artist. That means I can build my own schedule, you know, but it's also given me like an internal sense of freedom in my soul, in my heart and in my head as well, which in early recovery I didn't have because I was just totally obsessed with discipline, you know. These little daily practices are really important, you know. I used to think discipline meant doing really grand things all the time, constantly having a huge project on the go. And whilst it's important to acknowledge that these things are important, I think really for me where my focus with compassionate discipline lies now is really with the compassion, you know, the creative compassion of doing these small daily acts every day, like typing up a diary entry on my typewriter, continuing on the next page of my sketchbook, connecting with myself and, you know, the muse through doodling from imagination. These little creative acts of discipline all really add up. At first they do feel like a chore, and that's the truth, and it's important to acknowledge that as well, you know. Things in early recovery will feel hard, they'll not feel pleasurable, they'll feel burdensome, they'll feel tiring, and very much like things that you don't want to do. But I have to say it's important that we push through that stage, you know. It takes, 30 or 40 consecutive days to form a new habit. And I think the freedom and the rewards that we get on the other side of forming that new habit are really worth the minute bits of pain and suffering that we experience to get there. So how did I learn to connect discipline with freedom? That, I think, unfortunately, has a simple answer, but it's not a satisfying answer. And I think it's time, you know. I think it's time and experience. I think it's about making mistakes. I've put myself in so much pain over the last 5.5 years because I've been trying to do things a certain way. I've been trying to be disciplined in a certain way, which I've touched on has turned out to be quite a negative way. I used to weaponize discipline to beat myself up, you know, for doing something wrong or sleeping in, like I said. And so connecting discipline with freedom is, well, if I find a quick win, easy way to do it, I'll let you know, but I haven't found a quick and easy way to do it. It's come through a lot of trial and error, and I think, yeah, the discipline itself comes through trial and error. I fail often. I'm not perfect. I'm fallible, I'm flawed, I'm human, as we all are. And I think more than anything, it's important to acknowledge that and acknowledge that these things take time, you know. My friend always tells me it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. I think that's a really beautiful little quote, and I love that it can be applied to most things that are worth doing, you know. People only see that like, oh yeah, Joe's doing really well now, but what they don't see is all the hard work that goes into that, all the failure and pain that we get ourselves in. So yeah, be patient, keep going, connect, as always, is a really important one. And to close, I don't think that discipline is about control. It's about cultivating and creating a space for our real, authentic selves to show up. It's about leading ourselves with compassion. It's about being kind. But it is about structure. It is about routine. It's about thinking about how we can best move our own needle in the direction we want to move it in, whilst keeping compassion at the centre of those actions. And so yeah, are you disciplined? Where are you up to in your own journey? Are you still in active addiction and totally obsessed with using drink and drugs? Are you in early recovery and obsessed with discipline or other things like the gym, food, exercise? All these things I've kind of struggled with as well on my own recovery journey. Or perhaps are you at a similar place to me and you've kind of found a sense of peace with your own discipline, like by leading yourself with compassion. Or perhaps you're even further along than me and you have something really interesting to tell me about discipline that I haven't touched on in this video. As always, these videos are as much about me figuring things out as they are hopefully to just share some kind of message with you, the viewer. And so I'm really grateful for everyone that's watching, really grateful for everyone that's subscribing and liking the videos and leaving lovely comments. The comments are amazing, they keep me going. And yeah, I've started this community, haven't I, which will be linked below, called Creating Sobriety, which is my best attempt currently to bring my recovery and creative communities into one distinct and unique place where the two things meet. And so thank you very much. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.